Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Roman. Good
Good
morning.
morning. How are you guys doing?
Fine. Kathy is not here today. She's still in the dust, and she apologized for not being here. We have a guest today, and it's Judy Jelm, and I will introduce her right now. Good morning, Judy.
Good
You're on
morning.
the show. Good morning. I was saying this is Judy Jones. She's a speech therapist. She worked with children from zero to dot dot dot, and she's also using dog for the speech therapy. And she's our guest today. So let's have her right now. Good morning. I see you now in the full screen, and
Yeah, I'm back.
you're back.
Exactly.
Very good. We're very happy to have
And
you back.
some people in
Go
the
ahead.
therapy world, some people also know me as Judy Michaels Jelm.
Okay, very good. So for us today, you'll be Judy.
And on Facebook, I'm
Okay, you're breaking up.
also
Okay, we have difficulty of communication. You're freezing, frozen. Can you hear us?
who's it?
Okay, you
I
can.
can hear you perfectly and I can see you perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Now we see you perfectly and we hear you perfectly. So you were saying that you're known as Judy Michael Gelms or Michelle Gems. Is that the right?
Judy Michael. No, well, actually, it is Michael's. My maiden name is Michels. So
Okay,
Mitchells.
Michelle. Okay.
It's all called different ways.
Yeah, yeah.
hmm
Okay, great.
And my Facebook page is Judy Michaels Jones.
Okay, great. Excellent. So talk to us a little bit about your background. You work as a speech therapist. How did you start? And then you're working with children. Step number one.
I I basically started probably when I was 13. My nephew was born with cerebral palsy. And so I always went back and forth with my sister to therapy. And it turns out that her therapist was a lady by the name of Suzanne Evans Morris. And she was really, really big into neurodevelopmental treatment, feeding therapy, touch therapy. And so I've been doing this for really just a long time and loving every bit of it.
Great. So
It's
So
amazing, right?
basic, go ahead.
you work with children
Yes.
mostly, and you use dog for your therapy. So can you
I
explain
have
a little
found, yeah, explain that.
well the connection between the two? Children for one, and your dog, a dog used as a service dog used for the helping with the therapy.
Basically, I always found that kids love dogs. And my office was in an area that I could take my dogs to because I use them as service dogs because I have MS, which I've had for, oh my gosh, 35, 40 years, a long, long time.
Wow, that's a lot of work
And
there.
so then I was able to take my dog into all the business areas of my office. And I started bringing my dogs in, and of course I kept them in a kennel at first to make sure the kids were fine. And bam, it just worked beautifully. It turns out that I realized that lots of dogs are better speech therapists than I am because kids connect with dogs. Kids connect with horses. And you could just see. I used to use the dog for Sadie, who's here with me now. I used to set up systems like I set it up like I would take 2 bags, and if I wanted a child to work with something that was in a bag, and I'd say, pick whatever bag you want. And then I'd send one of my therapy dogs, over to pick the bag up and then bring it to me or bring it to the child. And that just became really, really neat. It made things, how should I say, very easy. Lots of times when you think of speech therapists, you think of them as working one-on-one at a desk and doing activities that way. And I rarely do anything that way. I work with kids on the floor. I work with kids outside doing all kinds of movement things. And because I'm just really lucky to have trained how should I say this better? I was really, really lucky to have met in my world trainers who trained therapy dogs. And they were always extremely kind to me in the fact that they trained me to be a trainer. And they trained me how to think. So think like a dog in those areas. I also work with horses. I don't own a horse, never have, but I love working with kids riding horses, which is called hippotherapy.
Mm-hmm. I think
And it's the same thing. Kids will work with an animal much more so than a oh, I'm back.
So
You
speech
just
therapist, and
use a dog as a treat. If
I'm waiting for the sentence.
I've lost listening to you.
So
can
you're
you
a speech
hear
therapist.
us now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, Roman has a question for you.
So kind of like
Yes.
for our audience to get a better picture. So a speech language pathologist is a professional who
Mm-hmm.
engages with um, clinical services, prevention, advocacy, education, administration, research in areas of communications, and shallowing across the lifespan of the infancy throughout the geriatrics. So you're helping people communicate through all the phases in their lives. And now you also can
In
communicate with
any way
animals.
possible.
Exactly. And now
Yes.
you can also communicate with animals. So you're kind of like a living Rosetta Stone, kind of, sort of. So tell me a little bit
That's a
about,
great way to put
right?
it.
So tell me a little bit about,
That's a wonderful, yes.
tell me about how you can
I'm,
help those kids communicate in a language that most people can talk.
many children, for example, if you work with a person who is deaf, they use sign language. Sign language is, you would think sign language would be the same in every country all over the world, and it's not. The sign language that we use, for example, in the US, is totally different than the sign language we use in Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I'm Greek, huh? What?
Now, and
Are you,
why that ever occurred, that's one area you would think no one would fight about. And so I also have a lot of signs based on, for example, if I want somebody to be quiet, what do? Shh, correct? And I use that same sign. I use that same sign when I say shh to one of my dogs. They notice shut up, and they become quiet. When, for example, I want a dog to lie down, I'll bring my hand, if I can get this in here. Ah, not doing really well, but take your hand up to the side of your face and then go down. And that really means lie down. So I tend to use for example, I'm sorry, I'm skipping over here, but if you work in the AKC with the American Kennel Club, they have very specific gestures when you communicate with dogs. So you have a certain sign when you want them to back up, it's a certain sign. When you want them to stand, it's a certain sign. When you want them to lie down is a certain sign. I had to relearn those signs. So if I'm working with somebody that's in the American Kennel Club, I use those signs. But in everyday life, you just use gestures that are really common in your own world.
Right.
And I use those kinds of gestures with dogs.
I totally agree with you, Judy. When I do behavior work with people, the first thing we're going to try to establish, besides the primary stuff, building secure attachment relationship, is start establishing communication. Like the dog wants to be heard, and the dog wants to be able to communicate with the other side. And so we have to take the gestures the dog is talking and then translate them into human language and start replying to those languages, because dog language is not international. So we have the breed traits language.
Yes.
We have dogs who have a general idea of language because it's being educated through the parenting, but they're not in programmed. So for example, pawing is a want. And we tell the dog, come here, or come here, which is similar to a pawing. So the dog recognizing the same gesture. And for 40,000 years, we've used body language exchange.
Exactly.
With dogs. So it's not something new. And I feel like putting this language in a frame of a different club or a different organizations or in a different language, then we kind of cause confusion, because not all the dogs get the emotional aspect of that gesture. So if I tell the dog to come, it's an emotion attached to that gesture. And I think that's the key factor that you eventually have to work with too, right?
Yes, that I also use for example, there are dogs that are deaf and they communicate perfectly well with gestures.
Yeah.
Well,
dogs are not verbal a lot unless there is a threat or a problem or a long distance. Otherwise, they're pretty quiet. I mean, I have 4 dogs here. They're talking to each other. Like, does he have some treats for us? Can I have my bone back? Kind of thing. They don't talk.
They don't have to talk. I see with kids, really young kids, they have such freedom of communication with dogs, because they can just look at them and they use patting, they just look, and the touch is just phenomenal. And so when I say,
Oops.
Oh man.
We lost Judy. Well, plan B. Okay, she said she will be back in a minute.
Okay.
Why don't we take the advantage of that minute? On the show number 1 of the season number 1 of this the Dog Connection TV, I have an interview with Judy, and I went to her house and I spoke with her and I produced a short video. Let's share this video. It's about an 8-minute video, and when she come back, we'll resume our communication with her. Bear with me, and we'll do this little conversation here, okay? And I'm sharing this.
I've been working as a speech and language therapist for decades, which I hate to say, but it has been decades. And primary emphasis, working in the pediatric area, though I've also worked adults, but I would say my primary area is pediatrics. And pediatrics, as we all know, is anything from birth through, generally speaking, 18, which is a big area. And so I've been doing that a lot. And I have been during most of that time in private practice. I've also worked in the schools, and I've done a lot of teaching in hospitals and things like that. I started out really working with children with special needs. And that really means I spent a lot of time working with children, like, for example, with cerebral palsy and children who have been diagnosed with Down syndrome, lots of different areas. I tend to work with the kids that nobody else wants to work with, but that's just something I've always enjoyed. And from that point, I not really redid, but I kept going on in my education, and I was trained in neurodevelopmental treatment. And at that point, you find out that everything you do, and no matter what you move in your body, you end up seeing and hearing from your voice, which is just, and that was just, you move your big toe and you can change your voice, which I think, so I worked a lot with physical therapists, occupational therapists. I love working with children who have articulation disorders, and found out that really to people, a child who has an articulation disorders could be for their parent the worst possible thing that could ever happen to them. I love working with animals. That's the other side of me, is that I love working with dogs, sheep, oh my gosh, goats, but with dogs and horses. Dogs and horses are probably my two favorite areas. I've had MS, but I've had a progressive MS. And that means I'm not exacerbation remitting, but I have a progressive format of MS, which means there's no treatment for it, unfortunately. So as some of my physical needs were getting greater, I had a lot of very, very lucky in the fact that because I've worked with PTs, OTs, and dogs all my life, I realized that helping dogs or service dogs could really help me too. And I have one dog right now, as a matter of fact,
So we're back. Judy is
We're back.
good. Nice to have you back, Judy. So
Nice to be back.
nice to be back. And while you were out in the cyber world, and I played this interview from our first meeting, or first show we did about a year and a half ago. I came to your house and I have an interview with you. So I was playing that, waiting for you to come back. Now you're back. I think we were talking about the language between children and dogs and the dynamic between the two. Uh, you gave me an anecdote of a boy who refused to talk or communicate with humans. And when the dog was there, the communication was instantaneous. The kid and the dog were like communicating, and the kid never communicate with adult or use speech with adult. You remember that anecdote you shared with me at some time ago? Uh-oh, I think we have a frozen picture of Judy. Okay, technical problem. Can you hear us, Judy? Hello?
Ground control to Judy. We have a serious communication problem here, I guess.
Yeah, and we're talking about communication. It's only the technology interfering in the communication.
Yeah, we should stop using that. We should just start talking like people.
We should stop using the technology. So, okay, here's
No,
she's back.
don't. Wait, don't do this. Don't. You're. They just follow your lead.
I don't know if you can hear us, Judy, but your sound is breaking off. And maybe one suggestion is maybe turn off the camera on your device and restart. There's a little icon at the bottom of the screen which is look like a gear, and you can, or there's a camera. You can stop the camera and restart it to see if the signal would be better, because right now we have a frozen picture of you and we cannot hear you clearly.
They follow your lead by your facial expression.
Oops, we lost Judy again.
Oops.
Okay, that's technology, and the god of technology is not with us today. Why don't we start? We can resume the video we were watching, see when the communication is reestablished. Give me a second. I'll go back there. Chrome, sound, this video, share, and I resume.
Decided to train my own dog as my own service dog to meet my particular needs. I would always have a dog in my private practice. There would be a dog there, a dog or dogs. And probably, a good example, this was a while ago. I had a dog named Belle, and she taught me an incredible amount, because I found out through her how to teach a dog to be a service dog and how to teach a dog to work with children or an adult. She taught me a lot. I had a little guy, he could not pronounce the letters K and SH, those two areas, and they're not necessarily related, but so something that I did, but he always wanted to do things his way. So what I did was I had two bags that I put those letter sounds, pictures in those two bags. And I put them in front of me on a table. And Belle was there with the little guy. And I said, well, I asked him, do you want me to pick out one of those things to do, or you want Belle to pick it out? And of course he said Belle, because everybody always loved Belle, and she was just great. So I just so it wouldn't matter what she brought me, back and forth. But so that little guy, he just did absolutely everything because Belle told him to. I didn't tell him to, Belle told him to.
Something always keeps happening here.
Judy, that's energy.
Yeah.
You talk about healing, you talk about communication, and you start vibrating, and
So that's when a speech
system is going nuts.
therapist goes.
Speech therapy will interfere with the with the technology, and the technology will interfere.
I don't know.
When we do healing, when I do healing,
anyways,
I tell people to,
Sadie did. She said, "Oh heck, you don't want to talk to me? I'm just going to go lay down someplace else."
Okay, I changed my microphone. Apparently, it was creating a feedback.
Mm-hmm. So, Judy, when kids come to you, have you
I
ever...
changed my position too, because sometimes when I'm near a window, it will cut out.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we're good so far.
We're talking with children or animals. what is your first approach? Like how do you establish communication from zero?
Roman, I'm trying to read your lips because I can't hear you.
Okay, I'll be very clear about. So
Still can't hear you.
when you're talking to children or you're trying to communicate with animals the
No,
first time, how do you establish communications?
I'm not that great a lip reader.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you sign?
Can you hear me,
Yes.
Judy?
Now I heard you. Yes.
You hear me?
I
Okay.
yes.
So he was asking you, how do you
Okay.
see the communication between the
Now
child
now
and
we
the
got the voice
animal?
back. So when you establish communications with people or
You
dogs,
cut out. Can you ask me that again?
when you establish communications with people or animals, what is the first
I'm
approach to?
not hearing Rowan and I'm not hearing Gaetan either.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. He is asking, when do you find the what is the moment where you find there's communication between the human and in this case a dog which is acting as a therapy dog, is the question Roman was trying to ask you.
There is no exact time. You can see it in their eyes. You can see what the dog is doing. You could just see that connection that just boom, that's just right there. Sometimes when you're working, oh, I'll give it a 2 year old, and you just don't hear any verbal, nothing. They're not talking at all, and you just can see that sparkle. And as soon as you see that sparkle, you got it right there. And I know that's really hard to for me to describe right now. Um, But it is. It's a sparkle. It's a change in the face. You could see the dog coming closer to the child. I think it's just a really cool thing to see, only because you have, and I'm saying see it, but because I use total communication, you hear it, you see it, you feel it, and then sometimes it just happens. I've worked
Judy,
with a number of children, for example, who are autistic. And it is amazing that the first words they start putting together are with their dogs. We try to match the dogs with the child. And of course, I'm partial right now because labs just tend to be a very low key, they have a low key personality. I used to think you couldn't even train a dog until they were, oh my gosh, you take them in maybe after 6 to 8 months. And I have a 3 month old right now that I started training, boom, right away with gestures. And Wrigley is now, well, she just turned 5 months old, and she has a lexicon of gestures, of following my gestures, that's probably around 50 words already.
How long was the training? How long was the training for this your dog? She's a puppy.
Yeah, the puppy, the 5 month old right
Yeah.
now,
Hmm.
they're just like little kids. You train in short bursts.
Okay. So you spend few minutes a day. Is that is that the idea? They're spending few minutes a day and then
For
coming back.
yes, for specific training, you might spend 30 seconds
Okay.
and then come back later in the day, and probably it's ongoing all day long because I've had him here with me
Mm-hmm.
for so long. So in terms of what people think of training, I think of just communication. We're not training, we're beginning to understand each other.
Yeah.
And gestures is the perfect way to do it. So if I would say, do I take real specific time periods? Probably no more than 3 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
Because a baby and a dog is just like they're babies.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the attention span. So one of the first things I really get into is have the have the puppy or whoever I have with me is to pay attention, to just watch me. So the biggest thing is to watch me, and we do things together.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say watch me, they look right at my face. And because then we can have a real neat communication system.
So you develop them the habit of having eye contact also with you?
Oh, yes. Now, for a lot of children who are autistic, eye contact is a real difficulty,
Mm-hmm.
extreme difficulty. And so I just move with them because I don't expect eye contact. I expect a gesture, a body movement.
Okay.
So
It
yeah,
sounds
because
very
when you're
powerful.
working with autism, there's so many different types of autism. Everyone thinks of autism as being something really specific. And in terms of the area of autism and sensory integration, uh, I haven't met two I haven't met two autistic kids who are the same. They all communicate and have different sensory experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this the same goes true even if you have a child with an articulation problem. If they have a trouble with an S sound, I just you just have to get. They need to listen. They need to experience it in a real global system.
Mm-hmm.
They need to feel it. They need to, for example, there are children with there are many different types of S problems. And what I used to utilize is I have a big therapy ball. And I know by my own training that if the kids press really hard against that therapy ball, it increases the tone in their system all the way through, all the way through the lungs, all the way through their toes. And because it increases that muscle tone, the S sound can clear up just automatically. And it's nothing I did to move that tongue one way. It's just by pressing a ball and pressing the ball against me. Or I have some children sit on top of the ball and I move the ball. And while the ball is moving, they get a little unstable and unsure. But because they have a great deal of trust in me, they know they're not going to fall down,
Mm-hmm.
but their body just gets all these tonal differences. And I find that's probably one of the better areas of what we call articulation therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Articulation therapy, in my mind, is movement therapy. I rarely sit at a desk with a child. I rarely sit at a desk with a dog, and I have had dogs.
Now
Don't
you
live
totally changed the idea of squeezing. It starts with an S, so the more you squeeze, the more S will come
because
out. I
I
love it.
speak in a scooter. It's either in a scooter or in a wheelchair. Sometimes they have to put the dogs on top of a table. And I start working with the dog that way. And they're really unsure of themselves. But the number one thing for me as a therapist is to gain that trust and to know that I'm with them and they're not going to be hurt. And I'm never going to drop them. At least in my wildest dreams, I hope I don't drop anybody. Never have.
Mm-hmm.
I've dropped myself, and people will laugh. And kids have seen me. I think kids need to know that we're also really human beings, and that I have fallen a number of times, and my usual response is I laugh. I tend to laugh, and it's not because I'm nervous that I've fallen, but it's just because I think that's such a normal thing to do, and I don't get to do things in movement.
The
That's
trauma
what is
release.
considered to be normal. So when I was horseback riding, I do hippotherapy in the past. I fell off a horse, and people thought I was crazy because I was laughing. The horse just stopped, but I was laughing because that horse wasn't going to come near me because it was my fault. I did something wrong. It wasn't the horse's fault. I was talking too much and not paying attention, and I fell off the saddle. And, but that horse just stopped, boom. And I also find these things with all of my dogs. They know what I'm feeling, but they know what I'm feeling. I don't have to say a word because they just look at me. Body language is the way, Roman, do you find that too? I mean, I feel like dogs can be body language
Well,
by
you said
far.
something very important.
Unfortunately, I can't hear you.
That's so interesting. Can you hear me, Gaetan?
Your sound is very muffled.
How about now?
It's a little bit better.
Yeah, let me see if I
You
can.
have a lot of low frequency in your sound. The high frequency or normal frequency
One, two.
are almost not there. It's like you're talking like a tin can. Sound is muffled somewhat.
Are you talking to me or Roman?
No, Roman.
Oh, okay.
Your sound is perfect, Judy.
It's because I talk a lot.
Yeah, and the vibration get through the system and everything flow naturally. Right now, we lost Roman. We lost the sound from Roman. Nothing.
We can just get him to speak this way.
But now.
Okay, it's back. It's back.
Okay. So one thing that you
Not for
mentioned.
me.
Okay,
One thing that you mentioned.
can speak
was
you
that-
louder? Can you increase the volume?
How about now?
Is that better for you, Judy?
I
No?
can't. Roman is a mute. For me, he is playing a non-speaking individual. There's no vocalization, but I'm watching your body system.
Okay, I will send you. I'll give him your address, and you
How
can
about now?
see him. Oh, it was coming better.
Judy, better? Can you hear me now?
Now, Judy, do you hear that better now?
I heard one little muffled piece of sound.
What? Okay. So my question is, actually, my definition was that at the very beginning you said something very important.
And I know that Roman is saying something really neat.
So,
but I can't hear anything.
The first thing that you said is when I established communication, I built up trust.
Yeah.
So trust is what opens up the communication. If somebody doesn't trust you, why would he talk to you? If it doesn't trust what you say is safe for the other side.
So Gaetan, I think you're going to have to interpret for me.
Right. So he said basically at the beginning of the conversation and in the middle of your expose or presentation, you talk about trust. Talk about trust at two different occasions. And
yes,
he said the trust is important because without trust,
it's imperative.
You're right. So I think he's asking you to expand on the topic of trust.
Trust is something when you know that someone is listening. I think the object of listening, we've just really lost. I talk a lot, and when all the kids I've worked with, as well as adults, especially stroke patients, etc., I want them to know that I'm listening to them. So trust comes as part of the speaker as well as the listener knows that you are taking part in the conversation. Nothing drives me, I'll be really honest with you, crazier is that when people start thinking that they know what I'm going to be saying. And they don't have the slightest idea.
Mhm.
So it's a matter of, so I tend to use a sign for stop, and people, or listen, just listen first and then respond. And that's how trust is built up, because someone knows you're listening to them and they begin listening to you, and you form this beautiful communication system
Is,
that's
is that
ongoing.
is that the
And
reason?
that's trust.
Yeah, is that the reason why a kid with your therapy dog will have more trust?
I'm losing you.
You're losing me now. I was saying a kid that you have.
I just got you back.
Okay, you have a kid. You're working with a kid. You have your uh,
Yes.
therapist, dog therapy. Dog therapist is with you, but
Mm-hmm.
the dog and the kid build a trust, and that trust is what the kid need to communicate with the dog, and vice versa.
I believe so.
Yeah, because
If
you
a
told me
dog
a
doesn't
story.
trust you,
Yeah.
in my experience, anyways,
Mm-hmm.
if a dog doesn't trust you, if a cat doesn't trust you, if a horse doesn't trust you, and know that you are working with them, not just telling them what to do, but you're
Mm-hmm.
working with them, that is a trust factor. And that's what communication is, a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an ongoing two-way street. There are many children that have something that's called dyspraxia, and that's the inability to motor plan their mouth movements.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something they have to learn. And I actually can teach kids as well as adults to make mouth movements by having them eating things. Because when you're eating, all the systems, all the motor systems
Mm-hmm.
of your mouth, your respiratory system, coordinates. And I'll be the one that'll say, "Oh my gosh, I just saw your tongue move up." And they're eating something. Or when they're using a spoon, you see those lips come together. And I just get really excited. And I'll be like, "Oh my goodness, I just saw your lips come together." And then they begin to understand, because I'm telling them what I see,
Mm-hmm.
not what they have to do. I'm telling them what I see. And when they see me get excited about it, it becomes something fun. Kids like fun. They don't really enjoy
Judy,
someone
do
who
you
just
use
stands there and
markers?
goes,
Do you use markers in
say
communication?
these words, boop, bop, beep. It's not fun. But if you're moving on top of a therapy ball going boop, bop, beep, that's fun. And I just get excited. And then the kids tend to want to, I actually, and people think it's funny, but I actually did a lot of my therapy sessions for at least 45 minutes to an hour.
That's good.
And and that's generally unusual, because in the school system you're given 15 to 20 minutes to work with a child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really tough, because you got to get it going. You just can't have your affect change. You just can't have what you're hearing, and if you're happy or if you're not. And when a child doesn't do something as far as what your expectations are, I
Mm-hmm.
don't say, "No, that's not right." I go, "Oh God." I, I tend to be a very demonstrative person. I'm going, "Oh my goodness, I did something wrong, because I just didn't explain that. Let's try it this way." So it's not something that they did wrong. It's
Right.
something that I didn't do right.
Judy, thank you so
Yes.
much for your time. Thank you. That was very, very enlightening. to understand the work you're doing and the use of the dog in your therapy session with the children. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Thank you for we are running out of time, but we really, really appreciate it. We're very, very thankful for everything you share with us today.
And if anybody ever wants to get in touch with me, it's really go to, I'll give you my email address.
Okay.
My email address, and you'll figure this one out really easy, is SLPJJ, which stands for Speech Language Pathologist Judy Jelm at gmail.com.
Okay. Can you repeat that slowly?
Yep. It's my email address is S
like Sam.
L
L.
P
Yes.
JJ 987 at gmail.com.
Okay, let me see if it's good. I'm going to put it there. And I'm showing it right now. So do you see the your email address there?
Nope.
SLP Sam Lima Papa Juliet 987 at gmail.com. Does that sound good?
Ooh, you're going to be a good pilot sometime.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, but you make a good pilot.
I know their code. Sierra Alpha November, all of that. Okay, great. Thank you. We'll post your email address on our.
Good
page.
meeting you too, Roman. Even though we didn't get to talk, even I couldn't hear you half the time. It's okay, and I'd love to talk to you.
I send you a message on Messenger.
You can be in touch with each other. He will send you a message on Messenger so you can talk to each other.
That'd be great. I have a lot of people get me on Messenger too, so.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was Judy Gelm, and the talk was about speech therapy, communication with dogs, sign language, complete communication. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, Rome.